remember that when I went to college, I was maybe 19 years old, and I went all the way to the other side of the country. So I was 2,000 miles away on my own. I didn't know anyone. And I remember I went to a softball game. It was a league, and it looked like it was a church league. I could tell by the names of the teams, like Goliath Smashers and Genuine Angels. That's a little bit self-righteous, I know, but in all of it, they were all out there playing, and I got invited to a dinner, and I was perfect time after church. It was a meal, and then it was also an opportunity. But I'm a starving student, and so I didn't see the signs of this event. It was not just a meal. It was a meal and an event, an opportunity. But like I said, I'm a starving student. The opportunity was the meal. So I took it and I showed up to this house, and was immediately aware that there's some tension in the room, that this is not just a gathering to eat potluck or something like that. It was more than that, and I just watched. And then it became time for us to get ready to eat, and the person came up and says, we're almost ready to eat. I was not almost ready. I was ready. And so, before we do that, I want to show you this opportunity. And they pulled out a black cassette. It's called a VCR. It's about the size of your foot. And then you'd put it in, and there would be videos. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about. Well, they put it on there, and then this is the opportunity. It was not just a meal. It was a scheme. It was one of those moments where you can make so much money and not doing much at all. You just have to gather more people together. It's called a pyramid scheme. If you're going to use the word scheme, it's already dubious already. So you got to just kind of be concerned about that. Well, I saw the signs. My feelers went up. I was totally starving, but I know that the bathroom was near the back door, and so I had to go. And I snuck out of there, and I didn't go back to that gathering again. It was a pyramid scheme moment. And I didn't have any affinity for that. And the scheme is one of those things that promises great things. It's almost like too good to be true. But unlike that, like the pyramid scheme is one model that it was actually became illegal now, I think 30 years ago. But when you think about the good news and how the good news of the Christian movement started and embodies an essence of more of a family business rather than a pyramid scheme. You think about a family business, we're talking about 64% of our gross production in our country today is led by a family business, whether it's a large corporation or small businesses. 64% are owned by a family. And when we start thinking about the family business, I want to start thinking about the things that sustain those businesses, like a legacy or integrity or this genuine care for your customers. So I want to make this comparison between the pyramid scheme and this family business. And I want to admit that even the church, the Christian church, whether it's the Adventist church or the Baptist church, and even the Catholic church and other denominations that are Christian, they have adopted schemes. You know, these programs or these marketing, ploys to try to grow in such a way that would be more efficient and more expedient and faster, better, and cheaper to do. And our whole history is just filled with those little moments. I think about those moments, and from college I'm thinking, why are we trying to trick or compel people with these methods, these techniques? They might work on a commercial, but I live in a church and it doesn't really function that way, do they? So when I'm thinking about how we can see these moments, you can look at it and you'll see that there are moments where churches will grow by these techniques. But over time, all you have to do is a couple moments, a speed bump or suffering or catastrophe, and all of those methods, well, they don't have that way to sustain this growth. And it just doesn't happen. We tried different things. We tried redoing your service to make sure it can just attract certain people. And then they try to compel certain target groups. We're going to get everybody who's 20 to 35 and put a target on their chest. And let's try to attack them and attract them. And none of those efforts that they try to do are continually happening today. They don't sustain. Why? Because it's really a family business. It's usually an intergenerational moment where we gather, we work, we pray, we walk through moments together. We hold each other's hands. We are supporting and finding ways to teach and learn and grow. And this is an organic family concept. It's always been. And we see moments where it falls away and we can have to get back on this track again. But today, I'm just so encouraged by this series that we've been doing, because it's been very good for me to just focus on good news. Because my mind always looks for the problems. And ask anyone around me, I can find the problems. I can find the holes. I can find ways to just get that a little bit better, faster, and shinier. And I'm tempted with this all the time. This is not a negative quality. However, when you're looking for good news, now we're looking at the good news. It's the story that embodies the fact that we get to go and live eternally because the righteousness of Christ has been given to us. We talked about the cross, and we talked about these moments and how this story is really different. It's not a common story in our world. It's special. And in all of that today, I want to return to that beautiful book because there is some good news in this letter. In fact, you can find the word gospel over and over in the just very first chapter. But when we read this letter, I think we're going to see that there is this deeper way. I think Paul would be an innovator if he were today. He would be okay about new methods, but ultimately, he would call us to what we call a deeper, enduring way. And Paul is going to lead us into this deeper way. And when we see it in his own life, he's going to testify in this letter. He's going to be marked by this sense of joy. Remember we talked about a few weeks ago where there are people that you want to be around. They're just like, I hate to say it, normal people. They're not, playing games. They are real. But these are normal things in our hearts. That there's this artery of things that we feel like it should be appropriate and good and true. He's going to say to this church, and he's going to introduce us to the Philippian church. We just read a few minutes ago. It says in Philippians chapter 1, verse 3, it says, I thank my God every time I remember you. And in all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel for the first day until now, being confident of this, that he began a good work in you, will carry it to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Now, this passage, and I hate to say this, this passage that we just read, it really reads and sounds like a Bible passage, doesn't it? It just sounds like a Bible verse. Like somebody is going to ask you to memorize this thing for your Sabbath school teacher. But it's a letter, and it's more than just a letter. If you think this is just one of these little apostles informing and inspiring and reforming people in these letters, you're totally missing the point. If we were to receive a letter from the orphanage in Belize, and our students were gather around and listen to a letter, there's a story behind that whole letter. If we were to go to Chad or Zambia or places that we have gone this year, and we met people and served with people and prayed with and worked, there is this whole story. Maybe if we received a letter from the east side of this river, on the other side over there. Maybe there's something that happened over there in a big event. And we would receive that those stories would be in the minds of people who would read that. So it's not just a letter. And moreover, think about where we find this context. The book of Philippians, but it was that moment, and you can go back and read in Acts 16. We read this several months ago, the book of Acts. Acts 16, Paul, he is moving. He wants to go north, right? And he wants to go to this place called Bithynia. And he feels compelled to go there. But guess what? Every step along the way, there's an obstacle. There's a roadblock. Something's wrong. There's a busted tire, and we don't have a passport, and something's wrong. It's blocking Paul to go there, and then his only way to go is to the northwest. And don't you think it's a good place for people to go to the northwest? Amen? I love the northwest. Well, he got onto a boat. And so you could read this in Acts 16. You should do this afternoon, but go through the whole story again. He goes into this place towards Macedonia. And maybe he just heard about a gathering on the other side. Maybe it was like a softball game or something. But there was believers were going to gather for prayer by the river. And behold, no pyramid scheme there. It was just people gathering together to pray, to talk, and to work together. It was a small group, and in the middle of that group was a woman. Her name is Lydia. She became the first convert of that part of Western Europe. And she's not just baptized and became a leader. She became one of those hallmark apostles, essentially, in that whole group, in that area. And you can see that whole story that's developed. She's a business owner. She was respected with her influence. And her choice to say yes to Jesus, to walk into that water and be baptized, began the beginning of the church in Philippi. The church of the letter of Philippians. It's not just a letter. And Paul, right after that, Paul got in trouble. He met this person who was demon-possessed, and she prayed for healing, and she was healed, but that caused such a fuss that the whole city got together, got them arrested. And it's not just arrested, but Paul, Timothy, they were beaten mercilessly. And this is like a suffering that we can't really imagine. They beat people within an inch of their life. And the whole story is, when they scourge people, they do it in such a way that you will never forget that lesson. You ever learned a lesson that you won't forget? I'm telling you, you can't tell that to Paul because that's not in his testimony. Whatever happened, you will see. What do you find in his testimony when he just writes this beautiful letter? It's not a beating. It's not the obstacles, the lack of money, the being disenfranchised, abused, ignored, delayed. All of those things along the way that he experienced in Acts 16 alone. You know what he writes when he writes to the church in Philippi? He writes with an attitude of joy. How in the world can you have this attitude? You read the letter again, and you'll see this attitude. And what is that phrase that you'll see at the beginning of this letter? in verse 3, what does he start with? Thanks. I thank God. Well, when you have people who are saying thanks all the time, it's one of the most beautiful things. It's the first mark of joy, is saying thank you. Yep, let's try it together. And you can think about what you're really thankful for right now. Okay, but let's say it together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Now you know how it works. Do it in your heart right now. Thank you. What are the things that you would like to say today? Out of all the things that you experienced in life, what would you say thank you for? This joy, this thankfulness comes and pours out of Paul's attitude. And you see it in the passage. It's everywhere. I always think about you. I remember you all the time. And when you're remembering all those stories, we don't really hear about the suffering. And why? Why does Paul lead with gratitude and thankfulness? Why does he do that? Well, gratitude is probably the one underestimated and overlooked difference maker of the human heart and the mind. And I'll say the mind because I'll mention it because the brain, if you could look at the brain, it lights up with activity, and the parts of the brain are so active and alive when you say thank you. It's amazing. Even more when somebody says thank you to you. It's just a different part of the brain is engaged. It's one of those difference makers. To say that saying thank you is, well, it's, like I said, you can't underestimate the power. It's like drinking one of those protein-packed smoothies with kale, without the taste of the powder and the kale. It's one of those special moments for a human to do. And when Paul remembers the whole story and he writes his letter, the whole story, the first convert, Lydia, she's in the first thought, that image in her mind. And there's this small group that was there. And remember, we played softball and we lost to the Smashers. We have those stories together. And that's real joy. It's not going to be found in fabricating ways to increase your numbers. Your number of community starts always and will always happen one person at a time. This is why Paul would call this community of faith the word partnership. A partnership. At some point, we're going to talk about ownership. Ownership is a good word, right? Until you have to release it. Ownership, that means somebody else is renting, right? But partnership is much better. We share it. But look at what some of the things that Paul would say. I mean, if you were to just scan through this whole letter in chapter 2, verse 14, he says this. He says, do everything with what? Out grumbling or arguing. So that you may become blameless and pure because the children of God, why are you complaining? if that's the thing that we have to say, like, Paul could say that. He could lead with his letter and say, okay, this has cost me a lot. And there's some bad people out here. And I've been mistreated, but I'm here to say, I'm still here, and you should as well. Well, that's inspiring. He doesn't lead with that. He just goes directly into this. There's no reason, place. Most of the things that people complain about, they're pretty obvious. So what's the point? Verse 15 and 16, he says, if you were to avoid the grumbling and the arguing, and you will be that individual, a community of faith will shine, it says, like the stars in the sky. I love his language. You think he's just a crazy theologian. He loves his church. He loves his people. You can find language for theology in his letters, but I'm telling you, that's his Wenatchee Seventh-day Adventist church right there. That's what he loves, this community of faith. Hold on, he says, to the word of life. In verse 17 and 18, we're just scanning through and see that chapter in that letter, actually. He says, I've poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice of service coming from your faith. But I'm glad, I rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad as well. He admits, look, we've had some hard moments, but this is what we need. Celebrate that's right. Celebrate what's good. Individually and collectively identify what we have. And I'm with Paul. I love this community of faith. And don't you? He finishes his whole letter at the end. He says, finally, he says in chapter 4, and you've read this before, as one of these Bible verses to try to correct people and make sure them to get pregnant or not get arrested or things like that for our teenagers. But remember this. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is what? Noble, what is right, whatever is pure, what is holy, what is admirable. Is there anything, is there enough to talk about that more than anything else? Think about those things. And he would say, verse 9, he says, whatever you have learned or received from me or seen in me, put it into practice. And the God of peace will be with you. I'm sorry, there is no other way to do church other than this right there. Okay? There's no trick, no scheme, no sneaky way to surprise a world of brokenness to come on in and be with us. That's not how it works. To function this way. But I see in you, and I see people, like whenever I go to a board meeting and where's Bill? Bill is here. I'm not going to look at him because he doesn't like long meetings. But he says every time when he asks how he's doing, he's so thankful for salvation that he has in Christ. That's his theme. More than money, facility, budget, meetings, long or short, I'll hear that. I did a road trip with my bro, Chad. I wouldn't trade that. I go and see Angela and Chris. And I look around the saints, and we bump in around, and it's like, this is how we grow. Don't worry about the methods. be the family. Be about a family business. How do you do that? Well, Paul starts out and models it by saying, let's start with thankfulness. Let's talk and say what I'm grateful for. It's hard to do that sometimes. It's easy to go to the business, right? To find solve the problems and things like that, but there's something about reminding yourself to remember. There's a parable I want to share with you. It's kind of a children's parable, okay? I hope maybe some of you would enjoy that, but I created this place called Evergreen Island, right? It's so appropriate in our world, right? But here goes the parable. On Evergreen Island, all of the animals came together below, underneath the simca tree. These are Hebrew words, where once a week they would receive the fruit and they would be strong again. Below the tree, any animal would say that special word. It was like not a magic word that would be weird. It would be a password. The password word would cause the tree to lower its branches, and they could invite fruit for everyone and to share. So something went wrong on this island because it was a busy week on the island and the animals could not remember the word. Who will ask the wisest animal of all on the island to find out what is the word? Who is the wisest animal? It's the orca. Her name is Shakam. Yeah, it's a great word, the orca. And who will run to the edge of the sea and ask her these words and find this special word again so we can come back here and eat from this tree? Well, Sip and Sid. That's the two otters that are, So they volunteered to go, and they traveled over the hills and the forests and the rocks, and they're fast, and they tumble over and go in and out, and they went to the edge of the forest, out to the beach and to the sea, and they asked to the orca, Chakham, her name, and what is the word that we need to receive the fruit? And the orca said, Uangolema. What? What's the word? Uangolema. So they returned. But I don't know if you know anything about otters. They like to play. And the whole way back, they were playing over the rocks. They saw a slipping slide. They were by a waterfall. They got lost, and they got lost along the way back. So they sent the bear, the great mighty bear. His name is Jumbo. It's short for jambalaya. Decided to go and learn the word, and so they could eat the fruit from the tree. And when the bear asks the word to the orca, Uangolema, and Jumbo said, now I remember it. Almost forgot it. He lumbered away, pointed his head by his paw and says, it's right there inside. He left to return, and then he got tired. And he got a little sleepy because he's a big animal, and so he took a bit of a nap. He never showed up. Then there was the eagle Her name is Nishar. And she took flight, and we went to retrieve this word and come back and be the hero. And everybody would say, it's going to be so great. I'm going to fly in, and I can make a circle and land, and everybody will see this. So she came to the edge of the sea and asked for the password, the special word, and the wise orca said, Ulongolema. Says, can you do that another time for me, please? Uongolema. And then maybe one more time, please. Uongo. You can say it with me if you guys want to. Uongolema. And she soared into the sky and imagined all the animals would think that she's so great. When she got down, people were clapping and cheering, and she was doing interviews and doing signatures. She forgot the word. Quietly, the tortoise went, and his name is Marmar. He made his way quietly, plodding, going around the trees, over the rocks, finally got to the place, came to the edge of the sea and asked, please, what is this word? The orca said, she said, I'll do it again. Uongolema. And say it with me, Uongolema. And he repeated 4 times. And he says, one more time, please. Uongolema. Finally, the whole way back, this wonderful animal, Marmar the tortoise, would say, Uongolema. And when he'd come to the tree, he would say, Uongolema. And when he'd go over the rocks, oh, Uongolema. And when he started to go through the meadows in the grass, is so high, he would say, Uongolema, and then he would climb up the hill where everybody is despairing, climbing up the hill. Uongolema. And when he got to underneath the tree and he said the word, you can do it with me, can't you? Uongolema. The branches released down to the ground, and the fruit was, what a beautiful story. I love to see how a story can remind me, but ultimately it's pretty obvious, isn't it? They were reminded to remember, and that's how we say that word over and over again. You can avoid and you can delay, and you can be distracted by whatever you're going to do in life. But let's follow Paul's example to lead with the thank you, to cultivate our language and our relationships with that. The second part here is confidence. Let's look at the verse and then we'll finish up. It says this, it says, I thank you, my God, every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. And what is he confident about? He says this, being confident of what? This. What is this thing that he is so confident about? It's not about him or a person or this or that. It's a thing. It's a this. That whatever God has decided to do to save us from this world, that I'm confident that that's going to happen. He decides to say that no matter what, the righteousness of Christ, what happened in Calvary, the moment that he was risen from the dead, that calls us to us again, that happens in the moment that we say yes, that thing, this is it. This is why everybody would come into this room. Of all the things, it's not because of my shoes and because of our air conditioner that really works well. We are here because of this, that thing. And this is going to continue until it's done. What a confident moment when I start thinking about how we grow. I'll show you an example here. This is a picture of a tree that was formed over time. And it was just little by little, with a purpose. And my favorite thing on my desk, I have a plant called Malabar. It's a spinach. It's a hot weather spinach, and it grows. And so let me show you that little spinach. It's a beautiful red or green vine, but it grows quickly, and it's only about this high for about a month. And you're thinking, what did I do? What's wrong? And nothing. It doesn't do anything that you can see, but right at the base, underneath the soil, those roots are getting ready to launch, because when that heat happens in July and August, this thing shoots up, and you can almost visibly watch it grow. Malabar. We'll see it in our valley this summer. I love that confidence that when we can't see what's going on, God is doing something wonderful. Is there a hidden work inside of everyone here? I'm counting on that. Oh. I'm going to look to kids for confidence. When you see the confidence in kids, it's so inspiring. Things that they have done and they know they can do. And it was over 5 years ago, I made a trip to Wenatchee to spend a weekend with a family, the Millers. And we went onto the boat on Chelan, and we went into the back, and there was this hike that goes. And so we did walking and boating and biking and climbing. One of the most beautiful pictures I see is my son at the end. The last one is, that's the kind of confidence of Morgan Fitzgerald climbing the top. That is the confidence that God has done it for us. And it's continuing to do it. Don't walk away from the community of faith. When it seems like it's dormant, it's not. Magazines, tabloids, and books today will say Christianity is dying. Church of Christ is not going to die. It is the only thing that's going to be here at the end. Let's get used to it.